Alright y'all, welcome back to Combat Arms channel. Now in today's video we're going to be reacting to a French unit, and that's mainly because I haven't been giving France or Germany a whole lot of love. I've been getting a lot of recommendations for French and German units, so I'm going to start checking them out a little bit more because there's definitely a lot that we can actually go through and check out. So if any of y'all can translate French or German for me, definitely let me know in the comment section if you're willing to help with some video translations. I'm totally fine with doing a reaction without a translation because I can generally tell what's going on, but it just helps with the understanding of what's actually happening in the video. So this video that I'm reacting to today was a bit of a recommendation because I did a reaction video to something from Liveth Forevermore, and he's a channel that does a whole lot of like military history videos and whatnot. So he's got a lot of good stuff. This one is actually about the French GIGN, or their National Gendarmerie Intervention Group. So they have a lot of cool gear, a lot of cool equipment, and they have a pretty rich history. So this is actually about the retaking of Air France Flight 8969. And this actually happened in December 1994. And I was entirely way too young to remember anything at that point or even pay attention to the news. And I've not seen a whole lot of videos or stuff after the fact explaining what actually happened with the Air France flights. Now, I've heard the GIGN, and I know that they have done like retaking of like flights and planes and whatnot. I'm not sure if this is just like a very specific incident that draws my attention to this. It's kind of like the the SAS with the Iranian embassy siege. When you picture them, you think of something before you think of other things. And with the GIGN, it's just retaking planes for me. So maybe I have gotten exposed to it at some points, but I'm definitely interested in learning a little bit more about this incident. So yeah, we'll get into the video. Again, if y'all aren't subscribed, definitely consider subscribing. It helps support the channel. And I do have some merch. I have a newish merch design up on the store right now. It's pretty cool. So definitely feel free to check that out. I do appreciate it. But yeah, this video looks pretty good. And again, this channel has a lot of awesome military content, so it should be a good one. I like the intro, it's not too flashy.
On the 24th of December 1994, Air France Flight 8969, registration FGBEC, was scheduled to take off from the Algerian capital city of Algiers for the French capital, Paris. Suddenly, just before takeoff, 4 armed men disguised as police officers seized control of the aircraft and held its 223 passengers and flight crew hostage, with their AK-47s, mini Uzis, and packs of dynamite.
Okay, packs of dynamite? That's okay. It's a strange thing to have, I guess. When I think of dynamite, I know how unstable it is. So, I mean, I guess if you're trying to scare people with dynamite, you can do that, but not really the best thing to be using for anything like this. But yeah, AK-47s and Uzis, yeah, that's not a fun thing to deal with. When you have automatic weapons involved, especially with close quarters environment like a plane, it can get pretty messy pretty quickly, especially when you have what they said 220-ish civilians on board. So yeah, planes in general are pretty hard to handle just because there's certain entry exit points. There's a lot of nooks and crannies, and even still, whenever you get inside, it's hard to actually identify who's a threat and who's not a threat, just because you have all these rows and all these people that could just be sitting down. So yeah, you really have to have your head dialed in if you're doing anything like this.
Immediately, 2 of the hostages were killed before a communication link via radio was established with Algerian authorities, to whom the hijackers proclaimed their allegiance to the armed Islamic group and demanded the release of 2 imprisoned leaders of an Islamist political party that had been banned in Algeria in 1992. In response, the negotiators asked for all the women and children on board to be released unharmed if negotiations were to move forward, a request that was carried out without incident and led to the release of 63 of the hostages.
Okay.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the Mediterranean, the French government was monitoring the situation closely.
All right, I'm gonna pause it. So, man, the Spas 12 is such an iconic shotgun. It just looks so badass. It's got like the folding stock and whatnot. Now, the Spas 12, if you've ever actually held it, it is massive. It is way bigger than it needs to be for a shotgun. But again, it's so iconic because it's like semi-automatic and pump. And I mean, again, only certain people used it. It's not got a whole lot of exposure. I know a lot of like SWAT units sort of practice with it. I think even the Swedish Piketenhet actually ended up using this for a little bit. But yeah, you can even see they have like the old 80s retro gas mask. He's got a revolver even. They have the cut off gloves. So this is a very iconic look. Again, this is a very old school look. But when you think of like certain people like the SAS, you think of them, you know, when they were actually taking down the Iranian embassy. And with the GIGN, this looks like a pretty iconic look for them. So it looks very, very cool. And yeah, again, you can appreciate the retro look of how the gear was just sort of put together based off of what actually worked. It's not trying to look necessarily the best, but it's just so iconic.
And in the late evening of the 24th of December gave authorization for the deployment of 40 operators from the National Gendarme Intervention Group, or more commonly referred to as GIGN, which is a French counter-terrorism unit.
MP5s, of course.
However, despite the fact that a large portion of the passengers on board Flight 8969 were French citizens, the Algerian government refused the entry of the GIGN into the country, primarily fearing a political blowback over allowing foreign troops to deal with a national crisis. Consequently,
I get it, but come on, you need to have the best people for the job. When you have, I mean, if you have a bunch of hostages and they ended up getting taken out because your guys couldn't do the job, it's going to be more of an international incident than just sending troops who can actually get the job done. So you don't really need to make it that much of a political thing. It's just getting people who are the most qualified.
The aircraft carrying the GIGN was rerouted to Spain, where they remained on high alert in anticipation for any significant developments. Back in the Algerian capital, the situation was rapidly deteriorating, as the terrorists, realising they were gaining no headway with the Algerian negotiators, demanded for the plane to be flown to Paris. When this was refused, a third hostage was killed, resulting in the Algerian authorities, after cooperating with their French counterparts, giving the all-clear for Flight 8969 to take off for the French capital in the late evening of Christmas Day, with a mid-flight refuelling stop scheduled to take place in the city of Marseille. Simultaneously, the 40-man GIGN detachment, still on standby in Spain, was ordered to deploy to Marseille immediately and prepare for a boarding operation. Arriving in the city at approximately 0330 on the 26th of December 1994, just minutes before the hijacked plane also landed, the GIGN spent the morning and afternoon rehearsing for an assault, whilst French police took over negotiations with the hijackers, who not only reiterated their request to go to Paris, but also demanded for the aircraft to receive 27 tons of fuel for the trip.
Okay, so you can already appreciate the professionalism here. They arrived like right before the flight's coming in, and regardless, I'm sure they're probably like jet lagged and everything. They're kind of just like tired of all this moving around, but they had to get the repetitions in, so they're training more and more just to make sure that they're not messing this up if they do have to respond. Which that's what it's looking like now. They're gonna have to respond because they're not really cooperating. But yeah, that's professionalism right there. When you're double and triple checking everything and you're just continuing to go through those repetitions just to make sure you can actually do it well, yeah, it's solid. I'm sure they're very confident in their skills, but it takes a level of humility to be able to understand that you still need to do some training for certain scenarios. But yeah, again, we have their iconic looks. They have like their face shields, which is really interesting. I'm guessing those are ballistic because they look like they weigh about 5 pounds of ballistic glass, but yeah, it's pretty sick. That's a cool shot right there.
This second demand was particularly concerning for the French, as that was 3 times the amount of fuel required for the flight to the capital, prompting fears that the terrorists intended to turn Flight 8969 into a flying bomb. Subsequently, in a bid to draw out the negotiations, food and drink were delivered to the hijackers, a task that was carried out by a handful of GIGN operators disguised as airport staff, who used the opportunity to gather vital intelligence on the situation inside Flight 8969 and plant listening devices throughout the cabin.
Very cool.
In addition, the hijackers accepted an offer to hold a press conference on board the plane, which was all part of a ruse by the French police to separate the hostages from the terrorists, with the bulk of the former being relocated to the rear of the aircraft, whilst the latter were confined to the front section.
Nice. Some good planning.
Eventually, at 16:45 on the 26th of December, the hijackers, having run out of patience, forced the flight crew to move Flight 8969 closer to the airport's control tower, from where they issued a final warning for the plane to get into the air by 1700, or they threatened severe action.
Yeah, ultimatums.
Then, as this deadline...
ultimatums don't necessarily work out when you're the ones trying to request stuff and you have a bunch of badasses who are ready to go in and take you out. It's not really the move, but again, they're just trying to put on pressure, and the GIGN were definitely doing their job on their end as far as the planning and reconnaissance. So when you think of like reconnaissance, a lot of times you'll think of like dudes wearing camouflage going through like a forest or what have you, or using binoculars. But people wouldn't think of like the whole urban reconnaissance in the sense of you sending these GIGN operators dressed as flight attendants, because with the whole planning aspect, the terrorists wouldn't really expect that to happen because it's a pretty risky move. But if they're able to actually pull it off, then you can get a whole lot out of it. Now, if you can have like a ruse where they're going in to deliver food and whatnot, then they're really not going to expect it. They're just think of it as like a political move, or just going in to send aid to the hostages. But in reality, it's a two-parter. It's giving aid and it's also doing reconnaissance. So it's pretty cool how they're able to sort of outsmart them in those regards, because you really need to be able to outsmart the enemy when you're talking about situations like this, when they're starting to offer ultimatums and whatnot. You need to get the planning into effect as soon as you can.
Flying past, a couple of the terrorists opened fire on the control tower, leaving the French authorities with no other option but to give the green light for the GIGN to storm Flight 8969. Commencing just after 17:10 in the evening of the 26th of December 1994, 3 air stairs, each carrying a team of GIGN operators, approached the hijacked aircraft from its tail end, with Team 1 tasked with securing the cockpit, whilst Teams 2 and 3 seized the cabin.
That's badass.
At the same time, around the airport, GIGN sniper teams took up positions overlooking the plane, from where they could provide fast support to the boarding operation if necessary.
I like how he's got the whole MP5 set up like the SAS had during the Iranian embassy siege. And then he's just got like again, it's a very retro look here. I'm kind of nerding out, but it just looks very cool, very operator.
Making their final approach to Flight 8969, Teams 2 and 3, each comprising 11 operators, docked their air stairs onto the rear cabin doors and conducted a simultaneous assault, swinging open the entranceways before storming in and shouting for the hostages to keep their heads down.
Nice.
Once no terrorists were identified in the cabin section, the French troops began the process of evacuating the hostages to safety, deploying the emergency escape chutes, thus enabling the civilians to exit the aircraft. Meanwhile, whilst this was unfolding, Team 1, led by Major Dennis Favier and made up of 8 operators, commenced this assault against the front section but soon ran into difficulties. As Major Dennis Favier recalls, "There was a small problem with the height of the air stair, as it was a little bit higher than the door. When we approached, the air stair hit the top of the door, although a slight step back, and the door opened. The air stair touched the plane again and the team went in. After several seconds of trying to get the door open, one of the operators threw his body weight behind the door and successfully opened it, enabling his colleagues to storm into the plane."
Wow, what a legend,
Almost
dude. That was extremely sketchy. You can imagine that plane's probably, or at least that door is probably about like at least 15, 20 feet up. So it's pretty risky to be doing that, especially during an assault. But, you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you have to adapt, and sometimes you just have to muscle your way in, and that's kind of what he was doing. But yeah, good on him. That's pretty solid. Again, when you're doing the planning, you have to consider a whole lot, and the stairs being the right height is just something you try and plan, but at the same time, you're not going to get the specifications exactly right. So I mean, they kind of did what they had to do, and it worked out for them.
Instantly, gunfire ripped through the front section of the cabin as Team 1 made contact with the hijackers, all of whom were holed up inside the cockpit with 3 members of the flight crew. Courageously, one of the French soldiers stood at the entrance to the cockpit and engaged the terrorists with his MP5, during which he killed one and wounded another, prior to being forced into cover as he incurred several wounds himself. Behind him, another operator took his place and likewise began firing into the cockpit, until he also became wounded, as did a further 2 soldiers of Team 1. Major Dennis Favier continued, "Those guys, the hijackers, were firing through the walls of the plane. We received hundreds of rounds in the first minutes."
That's wild.
With half of Team 1 down, several members of Teams 2 and 3 moved forward to the front section to assist their wounded colleagues and pin down the enemy, with the resultant engagement leading to a second hijacker being killed.
Nice.
Caught up in the middle of the firefight were the 3 members of the flight crew also trapped inside the cockpit, one of whom, the co-pilot, sees an opportunity to escape out of one of the windows and onto the tarmac below, leading to him fracturing one of his elbows and thighs in the process.
Yeah, it's a big drop.
Despite his injuries, his escape greatly assisted the GIGN, whose sniper teams positioned around the airport now had a clear line of sight into the cockpit and were able to engage the enemy, with accurate sniper fire fatally wounding a third hijacker.
Very nice.
By this stage,
that's another thing you need to consider. When there's people in the way, sometimes it's just hard for you to go in and do things. You can see they were firing from the cockpit door, and that can get very sketchy just because it's such close quarters and there's just such narrow areas, so they can just keep firing through the doorway. And if someone's trying to take that cockpit, then them firing through the doorway is going to prevent them for the most part. So if you can get the people out of the way, like the hostages and whatnot, and the snipers can do their job, then that's definitely beneficial. So it's good that he ended up jumping out that window. Probably not so good for his elbow because that looked like it hurt a lot. But yeah, the snipers are able to do work, which is very nice because you don't have to keep sending in people and risk them getting injured if you can just get an accurate sniper shot in there. So very nice. It's cool that they actually have that sniper set up to get a good view of that. So they were just waiting for that window of opportunity, and they got it.
In the operation, all the hostages in the cabin had been evacuated to safety, while several more GIGN operators made their way to the front air stair to assist Team 1 with securing the cockpit. Although reinforced, Team 1 was unable to flush out the fourth and final terrorist, who used a grenade and small arms fire to keep the GIGN at bay for 20 minutes, with one bullet striking the sidearm of one of the operators and detonating his ammunition. Fortunately, his injuries didn't prove fatal and he later recovered from his wounds.
Nice.
In the end, just 22 minutes after the start of the assault, the fourth hijacker was killed and the final two crew members were safely evacuated from the aircraft, having survived the ordeal by shielding themselves behind the dead bodies of two of the terrorists.
Oh man.
As soon as Flight 8969 was back in French hands, Major Dennis Favier at 17:35 on the 26th of December 1994 transmitted the following message. The operation is terminated, damage limited.
That's badass.
This simple message brought an end to the 54-hour hostage siege that left all four hijackers dead and sadly claimed the lives of 3 innocent civilians.
Okay. That's good though. It's good that they didn't actually suffer any casualties. So when you're talking about a situation like that, again, it can get super sketchy. If there's hostages, that can get very sketchy very quickly just because they can start shooting hostages. Sometimes it's hard to identify who's a hostage and who's not. And then when you're talking about a plane, even more specifically, it's very close quarters, and a lot of things going to be happening in a very short amount of time, and you're trying to process all of that. It can get very hard to do all of that. Now, the planning was very good, so they made sure that their planning was solid, which ended up paying off in the long run. But I just don't think they necessarily had the best equipment for the job, just because, you know, if they had like ballistic shields, if they had flashbangs maybe, or even grenades, they might have been able to take down the cockpit once all the hostages and the pilots and whatnot were out of there. Might have been a little bit easier. I'm not sure exactly what equipment they were using for this. Maybe I can do a little bit of research, or if y'all know exactly what they were utilizing, then I'd appreciate that if you can let me know in the comment section. But yeah, I think with situations like this, you tend to learn from what has happened in the past. So with these scenarios, if they know there's a situation like this, maybe in the future they can bring certain equipment that they might have been able to use before. Maybe, again, like a ballistic shield or what have you. So, I mean, it's good that none of the GIGN operators were killed. Unfortunately, a few hostages were killed, but they couldn't really do too much about that. But yeah, it's good that they weren't killed, but it allows them to definitely learn from what actually happened during this event. And I think it was pretty successful. And again, their violence and their planning definitely paid off in the long run. But that GIGN look is very much iconic. And again, when you're talking about these iconic looks, you sort of have a certain event that you can sort of pin the look to. So if you're watching something unfold on the news and you're seeing these people do certain things, like the SAS with the Iranian embassy and the GIGN with the Air France flight, you get these iconic looks from these certain events because everybody remembers watching it on TV. Everybody remembers it's sort of burned into their mind. This is the image of this unit. And yeah, it's very cool to sort of have that. But yeah, GIGN, very cool look indeed, very retro. But this is a very cool recommendation. And again, Liveth Forevermore has a lot of very solid videos. So I'm going to continue reacting to some videos from him for sure. If y'all have any specific videos from him that are your favorites, definitely let me know in the comments section. I'd be very much interested to check them out. But I think I'm going to be watching a lot of his videos in the near future. But yeah, a lot of good stuff indeed. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments section. If you have any other recommendations for any French or German units, because I think I'm going to be doing the GSG9 here in the near future, because again, they're very much iconic. So if you have any recommendations, definitely put those in the comment section. And if you guys aren't subscribed, definitely hit that subscribe button and hit the bell so you're notified whenever I upload any of the next videos, especially if you have any recommendations that you send in, because then if I react to those recommendations, you might be able to see them pop up in your newsfeed, and that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. That is it for this one, so I will see you all in the next one.